Hey everyone, I'm Mike Del Preti, and you're listening to Context, the podcast where we're talking to industry leaders about what's changing in the world of real estate. So today I'm joined by Tim Heyl, the CEO and founder of Homeward. Hey Tim.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. Tim, you've been out to my class a couple times now, a number of semesters, and you keep coming up top. You know, when I ask the students who their favorite speaker is, it's always Tim. For some reason, I don't know.
You know, maybe they can relate to me.
Maybe it's your boyish good looks.
Yeah, you know. Never been accused of that before.
So before we get into your background in real estate and Homeward and all of that, how do you typically start your workday?
How I start my workday?
Yeah.
Well, before I start my workday, I've got a morning routine. I get up, I journal, I exercise, spend time with my kids, make sure that my head's on my shoulders, my spirit's in a good spot. And then I have 3 hours of deep work before I am willing to meet with anybody. So one of the things that I realized early on, or at least many, many years ago, is that I can't lead well if my head's not on straight and I'm not thinking about things clearly. And so I usually take the first 3 hours of the day to focus on whatever is the most important thing for me, whatever the highest impact thing I'm going to do to drive the business forward that day. I'm going to do it first. And so that is not sitting in meetings or talking to other people. It's usually making sure I'm clear. I know exactly what I'm doing for the day, and I'm typically taking action on something before I'm jumping in and being reactive to what other people need.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm a big fan of dedicated deep work time. Is that totally locked down deep work time? Like if your phone's off, notifications, out of email?
Yeah, usually. Sometimes that deep work requires me being in email or being in something else, but it just depends on what it is. When I was full-time real estate agent, that was making phone calls. It was calling my prospects. And so today that looks a lot different, but whatever the thing that hasn't changed is whatever the most important thing is, the biggest needle mover. I teach my kids, I don't know if you read that book, Eat the Frog or Eat That Frog. It's like eat the frog first thing in the morning. I won't go into the whole metaphor, but it's like whatever the most impactful thing typically is the thing that you might try and avoid, the hardest thing, do it first. Get it out of the way, knock it out. Then you can. Gary Keller's been a mentor of mine, and one of the things that he taught me a long time ago is that you can be done with your workday by noon. Even if you're still working, you've done everything that you need to do, and you're almost coasting for the rest of the day. You're helping people, doing whatever people need from you, but you've gotten your work done before the second half of the day starts.
You mentioned when you were a practicing agent having calls, and this is something you've talked about in class. When you were just starting out, how many calls were you making a day?
I was making calls for 12 to 14 hours a day, single guy, no responsibilities, for about 3.5 years. And
how many calls a day?
At the peak, I was making about 1,000 phone calls a day.
Wow. Impressive.
Yeah.
All right. So how did you get started in real estate?
Well, I graduated from college in 2009. I was a finance major, interviewing for jobs unsuccessfully, got my real estate license, and started selling houses. So I spent the first year not really selling many houses at all. But once I figured out how to find customers and how to talk to people and get in the kitchen and have conversations, I figured out a repeatable process and just went all in on it. So I spent 2010, 2011, 2012, just all day long looking for homeowners that wanted to sell their house, sitting down, meeting with them, and listing homes.
And you built the Heyl Group, the team, kind of what, number one team?
Yes, I think number 5 team inside of Keller Williams, and it's still operating today, run by a gal that's been with me for over 10 years, and they're doing an exceptional job. I think at the peak they did 2,000 transactions, a little over 2,000 transactions. With the market pullback, it's come back a little bit, but they're crushing it.
Yeah, that's great. So really experienced agent background, agent yourself, running a team, and then at some point you decided to start Homeward. So what was the genesis of that?
Yeah. Well, my job as a real estate agent, and most real estate agents' job, especially when they're trying to build a team or build a business or scale up their team, their number one job is to figure out how to go find more business. And as you do that well, then you say, well, how do I do that more scalably? And the really smart agents are thinking about, how do I do that really well on the listing side? How do I find more sellers, and how do I get sellers to come to me? I built my business by going and finding sellers, calling them, finding people who had raised their hand in some way, shape, or form, and reaching out to them. When I got out of the management of my real estate team and I had people in place that were running that business, I didn't change my job. My job was still how do I go find sellers for this business? But I wanted to do it in a more scalable way. And I was also thinking about the fact I had all my time back, and I was thinking about, if I could do this all over again, I probably would do it a little bit differently. And I spent a lot of time thinking about, I had built a title company and I had built a bunch of ancillary businesses that went along with my real estate business, and they were all separately owned by me, but separately operated and working independently. And I felt like, man, there's so much redundancy across the transaction, from agency to title to mortgage to all the different pieces. There's a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of excess cost for the customer when you add all of these different components up. And there's a lot of friction that happens because there isn't one company that's helping bring all this together. And I felt like, man, I've spent over 10 years helping thousands and thousands of people sell their home, buy another home, make their move. And I felt like I had a pretty solid perspective on not just how things work, but where the problems are. I felt like, man, if I was going to go start from scratch and do this differently with everything that I know now, how would I go about doing that? And I spent about a year and a half kind of thinking about that question, designing what that would look like, and focusing on thinking deeply about lots of the problems that exist and narrowing my focus over time to where I believed the biggest problems that create the stress for people, both real estate agents and buyers and sellers, where that sits. And I started to narrow in on how I could go uniquely help solve that problem.
What are those biggest problems?
Well, for real estate agents, it's finding highly motivated sellers, right? So for real estate agents, how do I go? My own real estate team had this problem, and we'll forever have this problem. We'll continue to achieve higher and higher levels of success and always still have this problem of how do we get to the next level of more and more sellers finding us and wanting to come and talk to us. That is the core challenge of any real estate agent or real estate business. For buyers and sellers, there's a number of problems. Where I really narrowed in is financing contingencies and just some of the hassles of a traditional market sale. I'll never forget when I was a starting out real estate agent, my sister and her husband were moving, and they called me up to help them move. My sister, Catherine, said, "Tim, I keep going to every open house out there. I keep finding houses I want. And every time I find one I like, there's 3 offers on it." And I said, "Well, why don't you make one?" She says, "We can't make an offer. We need to sell our house first." So why don't you list your house? Let's go. Let's do this. I was a real estate agent. I wanted to help them. And she would say, "We got dogs, we got kids. We don't want to list our house without even knowing where we're going next." And that problem, it's funny, the way that they did it is they finally got the courage to get the house ready, get it ready for the market, list it. By the time they sold it, they didn't have anywhere to go. So they moved in with my parents, right? And they lived with my parents, ended up being 6 months. Think about 3 kids, 2 dogs, living with your parents for 6 months until they finally found the house they wanted and bought it. It's stressful. And over time, I experienced that that wasn't just my sister. That is most people's story in some way, shape, or form. They're moving twice. They're figuring it out, but it's super stressful trying to time everything up. Most people need their home equity to pay for their next home. And kind of the process as it existed traditionally for decades has been somewhat backwards. And so financing contingencies is a big issue. And it shouldn't have to be a big issue because the data exists. We know what homes are worth. We know generally what they're going to sell for, how long they're going to take to sell. But a mortgage company who's going to take the risk on giving somebody a mortgage for the home is not connected to the value of the real estate, and they are not in that game of purchasing and owning real estate. Therefore, they're not going to take the risk. You have disconnected parties that aren't able to look at the whole picture. Each party is looking at a segment of the picture, and it starts to create multiple stressful components in the transaction. You add all those up, it creates a big hassle. For sellers, it's a different challenge. For sellers, most people just kind of understand what the selling process is. I hire a real estate agent, we clean up the house, we do all the repairs, we take photos, get it market ready, and then we leave our house every time somebody wants to come and look at it. We clean it up, we gather the kids in the car, and we leave, and we drive around for an hour until we can come back and be in our house again. And you do that 20 times until somebody wants to actually make you an offer. And for some people, that's totally normal and totally fine. For others, it's really stressful. And the time that it takes to go through all that process is not 2 weeks. It's 60 days, 90 days, for some people 180 days. it's a big life moment, and it creates a lot of stress, especially for families who have a lot going on. They're living their life. And so kind of the complexity of a market sale and the challenge that financing contingencies create are the two core problems that I wanted to bring more certainty and more convenience to when I started Homeward.
Yeah. And when exactly did you start Homeward? What year was that?
2018, we did our first transaction January 2019.
Okay, so 2018, 2019. And I think it's fair to say the preceding 5 years have been pretty kinetic. Lots of stuff happening. I mean, what a time to be in real estate.
Yeah.
If you could pick up the phone right now and call yourself back in late 2018, as this was just starting, what would you say to yourself?
Oh my gosh. Grow up. Man, what I would say to myself is don't feel the pressure to move too fast. You know, Homeward grew very fast, and there were things that I could have done to slow it down in a good way that I didn't do. And in retrospect, it's, you know, when you raise venture capital, it's like taking steroids or something, you know, it's an unnatural thing. There's a lot of good in it, by the way. Like, I would not be able to build Homeward without having raised capital. And there's so much good in the ability to invest in creating value ahead of the profit that you're making. It's something I was never able to do in my previous businesses at a significant level. And I wouldn't change having done that, but I felt a need, and I think a lot of people feel a need when you raise that capital to just move as fast as you can. And the reality is, it's like the tortoise and the hare. It's not a sprint. It is building a sustainable business that's going to create real value in this industry and probably every industry. It is a multi-decade journey, and you can win that journey or succeed in that journey far better sometimes by moving a little bit slower in the near term and not needing to be the hare racing as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. How has Homeward pivoted over the past couple of years?
Yeah, well, so when we started at 2018, 2019, iBuyers were already a thing, right? The reality is iBuyers, as we think about them today, have existed for my whole career, probably long before that even. You know, there's been wholesalers, there's been local investors in every market willing to. You've seen We Buy Ugly Houses for decades. You know, any seller could get a cash offer for their home for some value. What iBuyers started to bring was this idea that you could get a full market value for your home. You could skip the hassles of a traditional sale. You could overcome the financing contingency, and you could do it without taking a discount on your home, which seems like magic, you know? And I think one day maybe that magic can really exist in that way, but I couldn't figure out how to make the math work to buy somebody's house for its full price and then resell it later and not lose money. And so I did not go down that path. What I did, oddly enough, I had a friend of mine who was in the same situation as my sister, and I was thinking about building this business, and I was trying to figure out what's the right way to solve this problem where I can actually make money. And I helped him out. He already had a real estate agent, and I wasn't actively selling at the time. And he said, what do we do? He said, my wife wants to buy this house, and it's already got 2 offers on it. And he was in the exact same problem as my sister. And I said, well, if you could wave a magic wand, I could help you. What would I do? He said, you could buy my house from me. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. We both kind of laughed. And I said, how else can I help you? And he said, well, you could buy this house for me, and I'll buy it back from you when I'm ready. And we laughed, and I said, well, I can't do that either. But if there's something I can do, let me know. And that stuck with me. And I called him the next morning, and I said, dude, I will buy that house for you. And I went and met him at his office, and we worked it out, and it was super hacky. But I went and took all of my life savings, and I bought the house, and he bought it back from me after he sold his old house. And it worked. I bought the house cash. We beat out the other 2 offers, and it was like magic. And so I ended up building a business out of this. So we called it Buy Before You Sell. We still call it Buy Before You Sell today. And it's basically the ability for a homeowner who's trying to buy another home and sell their existing home to use our funds as a business to make a cash offer and secure the home they want to move to. And then after they move in, they can go through the process of selling their home while they're not living in it, get their full market value, and close out the transaction on the back end, just flipping the process around. And we did that for 2019, 2020. And we never brought real estate agents on. Kind of the big thing that I wanted to do in conjunction with this was help real estate agents figure out how to use a unique value proposition to attract sellers to them. And so most real estate billboards or bus signs or park bench signs. They say, I'm the number one agent, or I sell the most houses, or they say, if you're thinking about buying or selling a home, call me. But it doesn't stick out. It gets lost in the crowd. Everybody knows 30 real estate agents. And so I believe that if you have a compelling message that's unique and valuable and solves a core problem that somebody has, and you put it out there in the world, your phone's going to ring. And so I wanted to be able to partner with real estate agents to take that message and use it as their own, to go out and use it as a magnet to attract sellers to them. And that's what we did. And from day one, real estate agents started bringing their sellers to us, and Buy Before You Sell grew very, very fast. And at the end of 2020, the market had gotten really tight. Inventory was at an all-time low and demand was at an all-time high. And so there were multiple offer craze everywhere. And so our real estate agents were saying, hey, we're winning all of our deals that we're using the Homeward offer on, but we are losing our first-time home buyers who are doing FHA loans and all kinds of contingencies existing. Can we use the Homeward offer for first-time buyers that don't have a home to sell? And so we ended up creating our second product that we call Buy with Cash. And it's the ability for a first-time buyer to use our funds to secure the home that they want to move to before they actually get their mortgage, so they can close in 5 days and all of that. And so that was a big piece. And then in the market shifted in 2022, we launched our third product, which I'm happy to.
Yeah.
as well.
Before we get there, let's rewind just a little bit. I mean, you decided to partner with agents,
Yeah.
as opposed to bring the whole transaction, the whole experience in-house and own it, which a number of other disruptive companies have done. Why did you make that decision?
Well, first and foremost, it bothered me. It seemed like every innovation, every real innovation that was coming into the real estate space, solving real problems, was coming from somebody outside the real estate space who had this attitude of realtors are unnecessary and the waste in the transaction, and they're driving up the costs, and we're going to come and solve that problem by ripping them out. And almost to a T, every company that has brought innovation into the space has started that way. And that has always bothered me. And that was a big motivation for me to start this company as a way that real estate agents as a group could go out and innovate and figure out how to solve people's problems and bring that from inside the industry. And a big part of this was I am a real estate agent. The Heyl Group has this problem of we want to stop trying to go find sellers. We want sellers to come find us. And so I used the Heyl Group as the kind of guinea pig. And we figured out how to make that happen. The Heyl Group went from $7 million in commission revenue to $20 million in commission revenue in the 2 years following using Homeward to go attract sellers to them. And so putting that message out in the marketplace is a big deal. And at the time, nobody wanted to partner with real estate agents. I think over time, a lot of companies found out that partnering with agents is actually a real smart idea for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, why is that? Why did it bother you? And why do you think all of these other disruptive companies are kind of circling back and now suddenly working with real estate agents?
Well, there's a lack of respect, but more so a lack of appreciation for the work that a real estate agent does. I think most people think that a real estate agent's job is to find a buyer a house or to somehow market their listing really aggressively. The reality is that where the real estate agent brings the most amount of value to a transaction is negotiations and helping navigate the actual transaction itself. It is so much more complicated, it is so much more complex, given that every single service provider, a buyer or a seller has to interact with is completely fragmented. They don't know each other, they don't talk to each other, they've never worked together. There's a lack of appreciation for the work that is done to bring all those pieces together over a complicated transaction as much as buying or selling a home actually is. And I think over time, most of these companies somehow figure that out. They fall flat on their face, or they just kind of struggle through it and realize there is real impact and real value in partnering with agents, and they want to figure out how to make that happen.
Okay. So let's rewind. Approximately how much money have you raised?
About 150, 175 million.
Okay. So not an insignificant amount. So you've went out there, you raised $150 million. You got a model that's resonating and growing exponentially. The market is super hot, never been hotter. And then things start to change.
Yeah.
They start to slow down.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about you being here in the Homeward story is you represent this class of real estate tech disruptors that kind of graduated in 17, 18, 19, had a couple great years, and then things got real. So how did Homeward pivot when things started to get tough?
Yeah. Well, the whole focus of Homeward prior to the 2022 market shift was partnering with real estate agents to go help buyers buy, right? Our buyers, the majority of them were also sellers, but the whole focus was helping them secure the home they want to move to. And everything was focused on that. And what happened was real estate interest rates, mortgage interest rates, started to increase at a very rapid rate. And as that happened, not only did transactions just fall off a cliff, but the nature of the transactions that power buyers from companies in my space, those particular transactions really fell off a cliff. You went from having 20 or 30 offers on a house to having 0 to maybe 2 maximum. And so this need for a buyer to make a cash offer really changed. Mm-hmm. And then buy and sell transactions, people that had this liquidity problem with their home equity, those transactions froze as well because the majority of Americans had a 3-4% interest rate, and now interest rates are 7 or 8%. And so they could move down and end up having to pay more money than where they're paying now. So the ability for your typical homeowner to move up in life and in their home ceased to exist, basically, for many Americans. And so that whole transaction type just slowed down, almost came to a halt, and it really impacted my business, a lot of businesses in our space, significantly. You know, for us, we were on a tear, and we were at a point of doing, I guess I won't quote the numbers right now, but we were doing more revenue than I ever fathomed that we would do 3.5 years into the business. And we were building up and scaling up and trying to keep up with it as fast as we could. Instead of raising prices and slowing down, which I might have told myself to do in the past, I didn't. It was, let's lean into this and let's just hire. And, you know, all of a sudden we had 600 employees and just barely keeping up with the rate of growth that we were behind. And then the market shifted. And as that happened for us, revenue just got hit, just started falling fast. And you take a step back and you can't solve everything overnight, but we took it in one piece at a time, and it was super painful. But the first place to start was cutting costs. You know, we had increased our cost basis for the revenue that we were doing, and that story changed. And so the first thing was cutting our costs. We cut our costs by about 75% in like 6 months. Wow. And that was brutal, and it was hard, and probably the most emotionally challenging time I've ever been through in my life. And then we, you know, said, okay, what's next? And the next thing was changing some things internally. It was increasing prices or adjusting compensation plans, a bunch of additionally brutal things. And once we got through some of the basics, blocking and tackling, the next step was, all right, now we have a revenue problem. We fixed our cost problem. We now have a revenue problem. Let's go solve that. And so you look at it and you say, okay, well, who are we? You know, you have this like identity crisis all of a sudden of like, who are we? What do we do? What are we good at? What problem do we solve? And after doing some soul searching, it's very clear Homeward as a company, since its existence, we set out to solve financing contingencies and the stress of market sales. And we do that by buying homes for people as a service, short term, to help them overcome those challenges. And we helped first-time home buyers, and we helped people who were buying and selling simultaneously, but we didn't do anything to help people who were just selling. And the reason we had never tackled that customer type is because the iBuyers that were out there at the time were paying full market price, or in many cases, greater than full market price for homes. So there was an inability to even play in that space. And homeowners knew that they could sell their home in a day when they put it on the market with multiple offers. So we hadn't gone there. But all of a sudden, the market changed, and sellers would not know, how long is it going to take me to sell my home? Am I going to get any offers? If I do, how much am I going to sell it for? The certainty component of the transaction dramatically changed for a seller almost overnight. And while that happened, oddly enough, the iBuyers either got out of the space or pulled their offers down from full market price to something significantly lower. And that opened up an opportunity for us. And so we took some time to think about, how do we want to help sellers sell their home and overcome the challenges. And we launched our third program we call Sell Before You List, was the original name, actually. And the idea behind Sell Before You List is that real estate agents want to attract sellers to them. They want to get more listings. They want to take more listings. And sellers, many of them, want to cash out as fast as they can, get their money, and be done. They don't want to mess with the market sale. They don't want to fix up their house. They don't want to clean it up. They don't want to sit there while it's showing on the market. Sell Before You List is the ability for a real estate agent to bring a seller to Homeward. We will give them a cash offer in 24 hours, admittedly for a discount. We're not going to buy it for full price. We're going to buy it at about a 10% discount. and we'll buy it, we'll cash them out in 2 weeks. And then the real estate agent themselves goes and takes that home to market, and they go sell it for full market price on the open market. And all of that upside proceeds gets put back in their seller's pocket. So it's the ability for a seller to cash out, skip the market, don't deal with any of the complexity, and get their full market value. And just like with our other products, we charge a flat convenience fee for it. And oddly enough, when buy-sell transactions weren't happening at the rate they were and competitive offer deals weren't happening at the rate they were, people trying to sell and get out of the market is a big, massive part of the market. And that product took off for us, and it's become a large part of our business today.
Yeah. Do you want to say like what % of revenue it is right now?
Sure. Yeah. Today, sell before you list is about 70% of our revenue as a business.
Wow. So that's a pretty significant pivot. For sure.
It's a very significant pivot. For us, it went from all we do is help buyers buy to a huge majority of what we do today is help sellers sell.
Okay. So here's a tricky one that will require some deep thought on your side. What would need to happen for Homeward to fail?
What would need to happen for Homeward to fail?
I mean, when I think about any company failing or Homeward failing, it would be leadership being inflexible, too wedded to their product. And what I'm hearing from you in your story is that you changed. You started out totally helping out buyers, and you completely pivoted the company.
Yeah.
You cut costs and you completely pivoted. That wouldn't happen if you weren't realistic and pragmatic.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Certainly, everything rises and falls with leadership. And thankfully, I have a great board who has given me a lot of room to be able to make a lot of moves in the recent history, a lot based on instinct. And yeah, I mean, real estate is cyclical. Things change. We always had a plan to have offerings for different market cycles, when the market's tight, when the market's soft. But we were a newer company. We hadn't fully developed all of those pieces yet. And a lot of companies will get stuck to what they do today and how they operate today, and or be slow to move on really hard decisions. And I think that being willing to make hard decisions fast is critical, and being able to make wise decisions ahead of time is also critical. I've done well on some of those things and learned a lot on other components of those things. But yeah, being able to, at the end of the day, we exist to solve problems for our customers. And if those problems change, you've got to look up and figure out how you need to change with it. And Homeward did a fantastic job of adjusting with the market, with the problems that were evolving and shifting as the market changed. These things will happen again. The market will continue to shift. It will continue to have cycles, and the inability to move quickly as those things happen could certainly cause any business in this space to fail.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. No, that's really good thoughts. All right. So we're out of time. Any other final thoughts that you want to share?
The real estate landscape is changing. It's changed a lot over my entire career. I think the biggest innovation that came into this space since I have been an adult was Zillow coming in and creating transparency, but also control for home buyers, the ability for them to go in and do more of the work themselves, the ability for them to have more power in the transaction. And I believe that where we are headed as an industry is more power to the consumer, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. And what I know from the best real estate agents across the country is that's what they want. They want more power in the consumer's hand. They want a better experience for the real estate agent. What they don't want is they don't want to be marginalized for no reason. And I believe that real estate agents have the ability, real estate agents have more control over the real estate transaction in the entire industry than they realize, and probably than any company out there that exists today. And it is about the future of real estate is in the hands of real estate agents right now. And I would just say that as we look out and we think about what the future looks like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, it can look a number of different ways. And it's really up to the people in this industry that have the power to lead innovation and lead change. And my hope is that real estate agents will continue to step up, and they'll continue to take action and ask that question, what are the problems that my seller has, that my buyer has, And how do I lean in? Maybe that's creating something themselves. Maybe that's partnering with a company, not Homeward, any company out there that is uniquely solving that problem and figuring out how to bring that, put that in the hands of their clients. This real estate landscape is going to accelerate when that happens, or it's going to continue to move really, really slowly over time if it doesn't. And so I am very energized and excited to be in a position where I get to go work with real estate agents that want that to happen and figure out how to go accelerate that. And my hope is that more folks across from the investment landscape, from inside the real estate industry, from all over, will lean in together and figure out how to go solve these problems.
Awesome. Well said. Good point to end on. All right. Well, thanks for joining, Tim. I'm Mike Del Prete. You've been listening to Context. And if you want to dive into more of my research or more podcasts, check out my website, mikedp.com. All right. Thanks. Catch you next time.